Patrick Gavin. I was raised Catholic and still go to church. Of course, the problems of the church weigh on me, but I still have determined to stick with a lot of the belief system. But I call myself a cafeteria Catholic. I pick and choose. I had a catering company and I had a great client, an older Monsignor in Baltimore who had family money and was quite profane and fun. He had a monthly card game at his house, and I cooked for the Cardinal of Baltimore, this Monsignor, a couple of bishops, and other muckety mucks. I was friendly with Monsignor and was able to talk with him on a human level. His belief was that a major cause of the church scandals was the change in divinity school in the 60s and 70s. Training priests always walked alone with their thoughts and their prayer. In the 60s, the priests started walking together. My Monsignor says that when people get together, a feeling out process starts to emerge and bad thoughts start to get shared. A confederacy of sorts. He said it wasn't the only cause, but it didn't do anything good. Of course, many young Catholics hid, quote unquote, in the church, and since priests couldn't get married, it gave cover to gay priests in, at that time, an acceptable way. I've also seen marriages break up when guys/gals in my neighborhood start walking together for exercise. Mike Pence is a nut, but he might be right in a narrow way. When people start talking, lots of stuff can happen, some of it bad. I know that Scientology is a snitching culture, but did these confederacies exist? Two Sea Org members walking around bitching about this and that. And how about your situation? Did you have a buddy that you trusted to tell your concerns about? And I guess about how many folks have left the Sea organization because they found out that their gripes are shared. Okay, I definitely believe that there are some problematic things in what that Monsignor was saying there, because I am not really ever going to be against people talking to one another, and there are no such thing as bad thoughts. Of course, I would leave it to somebody in an authoritarian belief system to define what are good and bad thoughts. And I think a more realistic term there would be acceptable thoughts. And within a belief system or structure like the Catholic Church or like Scientology, or really almost any group, you're going to have thoughts or ideas or things that are unacceptable. That's according to the guidelines and mores and rules of the group, and that's every group. But when it comes to controlling having those thoughts, when it comes to controlling whether or not people should or shouldn't be talking with each other about said thoughts, now you're talking about censorship, and I am never going to be in agreement with that. I know that there are definitely instances where people getting together and conspiring and complaining and all of that causes all kinds of trouble. I get it. But I will take that 100 times out of 100 rather than take the authoritarian control measures that must go in place to control that kind of behavior. I will never agree to those kind of authoritarian structures because that's called thought policing. So that's where I'm coming from on that, and I hope that's clear. Because I rarely say stuff that strongly, but in this particular case, I feel very strongly about this. So I wanted to address that first. And all of that feeds right into Scientology. Because I come from a culture where, a snitching culture, where authoritarian control structures are used to control that behavior. And, the Catholics have their problems, but they're Scientology light when it comes to mind control behavior. Scientology definitely has a lock on that, and they have all kinds of methods and techniques that they utilize to keep people from doing exactly what you described, which is getting together and bitching to one another. In Scientology, it's called natter. Hubbard used the word natter to talk about carping criticism. Right? Complaining that sounds a little strained, a little bit, that's natter. And in Scientology, natter is criticism or is being critical. This is also how critical became a bad word in Scientology. Because if you're critical of something, you're carping criticism of something is not particularly appreciated, especially when it's about Scientology or a Scientology principal or leader or person. or another Scientologist, even, right? You're not supposed to be nattering about any of this group or activity. You can natter all you want about things outside of Scientology, and nobody's going to bat an eye. But you start nattering about things in the world of Scientology, and people are going to have a problem. Now I say that. Okay, so like exceptions, of course, are if you're in an auditing session and you're nattering about your boss, the auditor, knowing that natter means that you've done things bad, something bad to your boss, that's why you're complaining about him, because that's the belief in Scientology, is that if you're nattering, it's only because you committed overts against the thing that you are nattering about. So if you're in an auditing session and you're nattering about your boss, well, your boss might not be outside of Scientology, but the auditor is still going to be obligated to ask you, what did you do that your boss doesn't know about? Or what did you do to your boss? Or what have you done that your boss should know about? Or some variation of that question that'll get you to cough what horrible, awful things you did to your boss that are causing you to now natter and bitch and moan and complain about him. What I just described is the standard handling for natter in Scientology. You go in session, you get your overts pulled out of you, right? What'd you do? When'd you do it? How'd you do it? Is that all you did? How'd you justify it? And if the needle's not floating, is there an earlier similar time you did something just like that, right? And you get the whole chain of bad things that you did, and you get all that talked about, and the auditor's writing it all down for permanent record in your file, and you're supposed to feel better as a result of getting off your bad deeds, and most people do. And at that point, Hubbard said, your need to continue to natter about this person will dissipate and be gone because the cause of your natter was the overts that you committed. Well, that's true sometimes, but it is hardly true all the time. And there are many, many, many cases where you need to be nattering. You need to be complaining. When a child is sexually assaulted, that child needs to be nattering about the person that sexually assaulted him or her. When you are being beaten at your job, you need to natter to somebody about what's going on, right? But in Scientology, that is not right. That child is wrong for nattering. That employee, that Scientologist is wrong for nattering. They should not be doing that. They should be, sort of sucking it up and dealing with it and getting their own overts off. And they should report things to the ethics section, and the ethics section will deal with it. Except the ethics section hardly ever deals with it. And as we went over earlier in this very episode, Scientology ethics has never dealt properly with sexual assault of any kind, especially child sexual assault within the world of Scientology. So the snitching, the standard handling does not include bringing in the police or law enforcement or anything like that. And that's the big, huge problem with Scientology and with destructive cults in general, because everything I just described, using different words and sometimes different techniques, but often the same result. Other cults and groups have mechanisms in place or protocols, I guess you could say, in place to deal with people who are bitching, moaning, and complaining. All right. All that being said, people are people, and they need relief. They need to get some steam off. They need to, blow off some steam. They need to talk to other people, other human beings, and they need to be heard. They need to, hear and be heard. And that is such a basic need that no control system, I don't think, short of making people full-on automatons or robots, will ever be able to beat that out of somebody. So in the Sea Org, in any situation, any group situation, people do get together and they do talk. But they have to constantly police themselves because you can never, ever fully trust anyone in the Sea Org. Not even your spouse. Yes, you can get away with some mutual natter sessions. Sometimes you can go take a little walk around the block, blow off some steam, talk about this, talk about that. But if you start making a habit out of it, it's going to get noticed. Someone else is going to notice. Or you're going to say something that's going to set the other person off somehow. They're going to go, oh, no, that was too much. Oh, shit, this whole thing is really bad. I've been sitting here letting this guy natter to me. I got to report him. I got to report her. I have to. I don't have any choice. It's been out ethics for me to sit here. We've been talking about, and she's been nattering about her seniors, and she's been nattering about her junior, or he's been nattering about, some job he's got to do or some project he's going to go on. And I've been sitting there listening to it, and clearly he's got overts. And I've had my own overts, and that's why we've been, commiserating. And it all comes out because, this jerk off goes and writes a whole report about the entire thing. And now you're in trouble, right? And that happens eventually to everyone in the Sea Org. At some point along the line, that's going to happen. And they're going to learn. And that's when you learn about the snitching culture and what it really means. And that's when you learn about thought policing and how it's done. And you go, oh, because you're sitting now in front of an ethics officer, a Sea Org ethics officer who's sitting there going, what the hell, dude? You've been sitting here nattering up a storm. You got overts, and I want to know what they are. Here's a ream of paper. You better start writing. And you're doing dishes until 3 in the morning. When you're not writing down your overts and withholds, right? That's how it happens. And after a few nights of, being up until 3 or 4 in the morning and trudging in with 2 hours of sleep early to make up the damage for all your natter, you learn, I don't want to experience this again. I think I'm going to keep my thoughts to myself. And if those thoughts happen to be about criminal activities that you're seeing or participating in, who are you going to tell? You have now learned that you can't tell anyone. And you're not supposed to tell anyone. That's the whole point. So that's how that works, right? And there are other mechanisms that are brought in. There's sec checking, there's truth rundown, there is the RPF, there are ethics conditions, there's social ostracizing, there's eventually there's disconnection if it really goes all the way. So all of these things pile in on a person, right, to force them to change their mind about their right to speak. And that's how that works. And I hope I laid that all out clearly enough. There you go.